people read it. She begins comparing the caste system to a house, saying that sometimes we just buy a house, and when we walk in, we just don't see this deep things that are going on until we just go deeper, and then we realize that there's some things going on. And she says there is a beam that can hold the whole house. So the caste system can be like that. It's just like really hard to get over it. And she doesn't think that we can fully get over it. But there's some things that she says that we can work on as non-black people. And then after that, she compares, and this is probably why some people didn't like the book, and I see why. She talks about 3 stories, parallel stories. Germany and whatever happened in there. And then she talks about the Indians, the caste in Indian, and the untouchables, and then the African American in the States. And she compares the 3 of them. What I think it's the most, I don't know if it's an eye-opening, but what's the word that I'm looking for? Probably hard for people to read, is that she compares whatever Hitler did in Germany, what was going on here. And she actually says that she thinks that Hitler, when he starts saying we want purity and stuff, he turned his head to the States and said, like, if they're doing it, why we couldn't? So he said, like, if they have these laws about separating people, like, why we couldn't? So then he's like, let's do the same that they're doing it here. And then, of course, we know all the concentrate camps that are happening, and some people are like, but it's not the same. But she says, you know, maybe they had 2 or 3, or I don't know how many, like, concentrate campuses with a lot of people. They would clean them. But in the States, they have like little houses, little campuses, where they were having people and they were exploiting them. So of course, like some people were like, "That's ludicrous. That's not true. Like, she's crazy. Why is she saying that?" She uses a lot of storytelling. She's a storyteller, and I think she's fantastic. And that's what it's most important. Just right now, the power of storytelling, I think it's really, really important. And she uses like really old stories and stories from like last year. And of course, she uses her own accounts of what was happening in her life, and offers some small solutions on how we should help each other. Not just them, or not us, or whomever, the lower caste or the upper caste, but all of us, which is really important. And then, as I said, she uses these 3 stories from India and from Germany and from the States, and she uses those 3 to talk about 8 pillars that we can learn about all the caste system that it's happening. One of the stories that I think that it was, I don't know, I really like it, and it makes me smile and then cry at the same time. I needed to put this book several times down just to process a little bit, because it's harsh. It's hard to read some things that she says, because I'm like, really? How could no one see the pain of other people? So she offers the story of this little girl named Miss, and she just says that back then no one was referring to black people as Miss or Mister. They were just not happening. So a parent was just like pissed about it. I was like, why we cannot call Miss a person, just a person? So he ended up naming his little kid Miss, like a girl. That was her name, Miss. So whenever she went to school, a professor just asked her, like, what's your name? Miss. It's like, that's ridiculous. Like, don't be silly. What's your name? Like, Miss. I was like, I don't understand. Like, I'm asking you, like, this is a serious question. Please tell me your name. And it's like, my name is Miss. My dad and my mom named me Miss. So then the dad said, that way I'm at least forcing people to call my little kid as she is a Miss. And I think that was an eye-opening. I didn't know. I mean, I knew a lot of things that were happening, but I didn't know about that. And then when he said, like, I'm naming my little girl Miss, I was like, okay. So then she goes ahead and start with the 8 pillars. And pillar number 1, I think all of us know about that. And she talks about the divine will and the laws of nature. And she talks about the curse of Ham, and how she thinks most of, not just Christians, but in general, are racist because of that, because of what happened and what they said about Ham and Canaan being cursed. And then he talks about this other story from India, from the Hindu text and Manu, and she talks about 4 varnas, and there's like the feet, and then there is just goes up until the head, and then the upper class, it's named the Brahmin, and that's the head. That's the most better people in India, the rich people. And she offers an account of story of how a person being a part of the Brahmin, he comes to the States to study. And then whenever he comes, people treat him like he is not from like the upper caste. And he's like, I just don't understand what's happening. Like, I'm rich, I'm from a good family, but yet I'm here and they see my skin color and I'm not longer a part of the upper class. So he is confused of what is happening. So that's what she offers in the first pillar, saying that she thinks that that story, or us thinking that their upper classes or caste comes from that story. And the pillar number 2 is, it's like heritability. And I mean, that's pretty straightforward. If your dad is from the upper class and you were born in that class, you're part of that class. You're part of that caste too. There is nothing you can do. Even, she says, even if you end up losing everything, you're still a part of that class. There is nothing you can do. You are not black, you're white. So you are enjoying being a part of the upper class. And then pillar number 3, it's endogamy and the control of marriage. And you know, there were laws against that. You could not marry anyone that was not within your caste. She offers several stories, but 2 stories here that I think are important to mention. One is that a black person was about to go to jail and get whipped because he was married to a white person. Whenever they did all, they go back and track their family history, they realize that the woman it's Sicilian. She's not American, but it's white. So they were like, oh, okay, it's okay if you're married to her. So they ended up releasing him from jail because he was like, she's not from here. I was like, oh, okay. And I mean, you're gone. It's okay. And then, I mean, that was one of a story about that. And the other story about endogamy is the story about that I think, I'm pretty sure you know about this, but she says that the Supreme Court did not overturn these prohibitions until 1967. And I mean, we know about that, but then she says Alabama, the last state to do so, did not throw out its law against intermarriage until the year 2000. I was like, really? 2000? I mean, we're talking about 21 years ago. You could probably still go and say, hey, you cannot marry each other. That's against the law. And then we go to pillar number 4. She talks about purity versus pollution. And she goes deeper here about how it was illegal to handshake someone. People were afraid of handshaking someone. She says about this little girl that started playing with a black little girl that lived in her house as part of the maid people. And when the mom realizes that, she just takes the girl and starts rubbing her hands so bad that they were like bleeding. And the little girl was just like yelling, "Why are you doing this?" And she just tells her, because they have germs that you're not supposed to touch them. Why do you do that? So the mom is just freaking out about that. And she talks about something that it went really deep with me, about pools, because I love swimming. That's what I do to exercise and calm myself. And she says that whenever a black person go inside the pool, they clear everything out, take all the water, like disinfect everything, put new water in, and they were like, okay, you guys can come and swim. And that was like until 1960 something, when people wanted to go to public pools, and they were just not allowed to go there. And then she offers another story about this baseball league, T-ball, and they're just out for a picnic. And there was like this just one little black guy, and the police person, well, not the police, I mean the person in just receiving payments and stuff, was like, he cannot get in. And the rest of the parents were like, why not? It's like, because that's the law. He's black, he cannot come in. He cannot even go to the pool. And everyone was so mad. At the end of the discussion, she says that they offer a solution, and the solution was to put a blanket outside where everybody can see him, and allow the people to bring him food and see it 1 hour at a time, so he does not feel alone. And all this time they were still discussing, like, why don't you let him? And then the guy was just like, okay, he can go in, but whenever he goes in, every other white person needs to be out of the pool. I'm gonna put him on top of this plastic. I'm gonna push him around the pool, and I'm gonna tell him, and that's what he said several times to the black kid, you cannot touch the water. I'm gonna allow you to be on top of the floaty. I'm gonna push you. You cannot touch the water. Cannot. So push him around, and then when he's out, he said, okay, everyone, you can keep playing inside the pool. So I was like, wow. I mean, that was like eye-opening. I was like, wow, I don't think I can just fully understand that, because I love pool. So I cannot understand, as a Mexican right now, being to the wellness center and said like, oh, sorry, you can't. Or you need to wait until like no one is in there and you can swim. Like, I just cannot fully understand that. And then she goes to the pillar number 5, and it's occupational hierarchy. And she says that she thinks that black people are never going to overcome occupationally talking, do whatever they want. And the story that she offers here is that if we see all the black people right now that are famous and rich, they're like 95% NBA players. They are actors. I mean, they are in the entertainment industry. And she said that all of this history of racism and caste obligate them to go that way, because they just couldn't find a job. Even though they went to Yale or Harvard, and they were graduates, they just couldn't get where they wanted to be. So then She says that they are stuck there forever. Like occupationally, that's the story, that's their history and the story of some of them, and they just have to endure that. And then pillar number 6 is the humanization and stigma. And I think this is the pillar that it's the most like sad, because she goes and touches in several stories, but they're like delicate. They're like, if you're like me when you're reading and you imagine everything, I was like, I just can't continue. I just needed to put that. I was like, because I just can't. I'm getting so mad. And of course, I mean, you have heard all of this, and I don't have to talk more because of course I don't have like a lot of time. But she talks about in concentrating camps when they were stripped all the way down, and just they were dehumanizing them. And with black people, they were doing the same here when they were getting whipped, when they were getting lynched. Some of them were just naked, and they will whip them up to 400 times, and you could see like inside them and how they die. So I'm just thinking, how can people see that and not feel, I don't know, weird, you know? So I think that if you read the book, that one is probably going to get you a little bit. And then she goes to pillar number 7, terror and enforcement, and it goes alongside number 6 a little bit, talking about how white people from the upper caste were enforcing terror by whipping people really bad, up to 400 times. And they were pretty clear that this is going to happen to you if you don't follow what we're telling you. They were enforcing terror as well whenever they were selling and separating all the families. They were forcing them to smile, so people can say, oh, they're happy. This is a happy slave. I want to get him. So they were telling him, if you don't smile and don't make people think that you are happy, you're going to get whipped. And I'm not going to whip you. I'm going to whip your mom, your wife, your kids, your pregnant wife. So of course, the terror that all of them were feeling were like, okay, I'm going to be the slave you want me to be, because if not, this is going to run deep. And then we go to pillar number 8, inherent superiority versus inherent inferiority. And she once again says that all of us are really stuck. If your dad was a CEO and went to Harvard, most likely you are going to go to an Ivy League and you're going to have a good job. If your mom or dad were janitors, most likely you are going to be, maybe a janitor or something like that. She says that this is like a skin that we wear. Like if you're black, people assume things about you. It's not that you can get out of it. It's just part of your history. And that's where, at the end, she offers some solutions about that. But the story in this pillar that I think she says that I think it's worth mentioning, it's at the end. She said that there, in 1944, there was a contest in the school system, and they were asking the little kids, sixth graders, to write an essay on what do they think. This is when World War II finished, and the question was, what to do with Hitler after the war? That was a question for the kids. The winning essay said that she said, like, she won the student essay contest with a single sentence, and she said, put him in a black skin and let him live the rest of his life in America. I was like, wow. That's what she thinks. That will be like the worst punishment. And then at the end of the book, kind of like closing, and if we can discuss with some questions, she offers some other solutions for us to try to overcome all of this. She says, of course, that racism is like a cancer in remission. And she, of course, talks a little bit about Trump, and whenever this was probably like silent, and then he emerges and starts talking about things, so then all of the racism in us like flourish. And some people are more like, yes, that's what I think. I'm thankful that someone in power is saying, so I can continue saying. And she talks about unconscious bias. And she just says that all of us, we have exposed to this culture of negative messages about African Americans and other marginalized groups, that as much as 80% of white Americans call unconscious bias against Black Americans. And it's not that we are racist or that we want, because we want to love all people, but sometimes we just have these biases that whenever we realize and we said, oh, that, I was like, oh, why did I say that? Or why did I feel that way? And I think that's because it's all the propaganda that is around us and that we are reading and seeing through TV shows or whatever. She says that she thinks that a lot of talent has been lost, and she touches in Einstein at the end of the book. She says that she's happy that he could fled Germany, and when he came here, he realized all of what was happening. It was like, I came here because I thought I was going to be free, but here he was a white person, so he was okay. But he then started advocating for Black people, and he says, she says, can you imagine how many Einsteins we lost because we killed a lot of talented people? And I was like, yeah, that's true. And then at the end, she says that we need to awake. And she offers here a story about a story that touches, or she says that we need to be radical empathy. And she closes saying a story about a friend. She says that she was eating with a friend, white person from an upper class, and everyone around them were getting their drinks, their food super fast. She said there was like other 2 tables that came after us, and they were having bread and everything, and we were just sitting there. And my friend eventually realized that it was because I was sitting in there. So she stood up, yelled at everyone, and she was like, I did not want to call attention, but she was really mad at the situation. And then she says, not all of us feel that we can do that. Black people don't feel that they can just advocate for themselves, because then they said they are liars. They don't even listen to us if we start yelling to the manager, but somehow they listen to my friend. And she says that that is a privilege, that just stand out for others, it's a privilege, and that we need to really be conscious about that and try to do the same thing. And so she says that it's not enough to empathize or sympathize. We need to be radically empathy. And she just ends up saying that we need to experience another life from their perspective, not as we imagine that how they will feel, but radical empathy is not about you and what you think you would do in a situation you have never been in and perhaps never will. It is the kindred connection from a place of deep knowing that opens your spirit to the pain of another as they perceive it. And I was like, yeah, it's not just about empathy and think that we can understand them. It's radical empathy, what she thinks can end this. If all of us do radical empathy, like slowly we can get out of this racism or caste. So yeah, there is a lot. I hope you can read the book. It's really book. There's a lot of more stories, so much more information that she gives about this, so we can understand. And she says at the end too that we need to educate ourselves, and we need to learn that we need to educate, not just ask, but read. And thus she reads a lot, and she says, I mean, at the end, probably almost a quarter of the book is just all the books that she read just to write this book. So, yeah.
Thank you, Elsa.